also is considered to be the first Nasi, the first leader of Chabad. Then the second Rebbe was the Mittler Rebbe, his son, and the third was the Tzemach Tzedek, who was a grandson of the Alter Rebbe from a daughter. But he also married his first cousin, so he was also a son-in-law of the Mittler Rebbe. Now, the Maimorim that the Alter Rebbe had said were recorded, what's called Tanachos. So there were transcripts of the Maimorim. Each individual Maimer could have even multiple different transcripts. There are Maimorim, in other words, amongst the transcribers of the Alter Rebbe's Maimorim. So there was the Alter Rebbe's brother, his name was Rabbi Yehuda Leib, the Maril, as he's referred to. Also the Mittler Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe's son, also transcribed the Maimorim. And also the Tzemach Tzedek, the grandson. He was old enough to have heard the Maimorim directly from the Alter Rebbe. And then there's also Maimorim that are from a chassid, that are Pinchas Reizes. So these are mainly these are the different individuals that transcribed the Alter Rebbe's Maimor. But they were never published officially. The Tzemach Tzedek began the project of publishing the Maimorim of the Alter Rebbe. So there's a letter actually that's printed in the back of the Likutei Torah, which is a letter that the Frierdiker Rebbe wrote to a chassid. His last name was Shmotkin. He's actually the ancestor of the Shmotkin family, if anyone is familiar with them. Shluchim in Milwaukee. So this particular chassid had learned in Lubavitch. He moved to Warsaw, and at some point he he was a publisher, a printer. And although the Maimorim of the Alter Rebbe had already been published, but he, I guess, started a project of reprinting them. And he had asked the Frierdiker Rebbe why the Maimorim were divided into two separate books, Torah Or, which covers basically Bereshis and Shmais, and the next book, Likutei Torah, which covers Vayikra, Bamidbar, and Dvar. So that's not exact, because what's interestingly, last week, Parshas Vayakhel was the last series of Maimorim in the first book of Torah Or, but there's still one more parsha to Shmais, and that is Pekudei, which is this week. So Pekudei. So actually, Likutei Torah, we generally think of Likutei Torah as beginning with the Maimorim of Chumash, Vayikra, etc. But the truth is that it actually begins already with Parshas Pekudei. Mm-hmm. And not only that, there are a few Maimorim even before Parshas Pekudei, from Parshas B'Shalach, which are a few weeks before. So apparently those are Maimorim that had not, for some reason, they were not included in Torah. So it will all become understood based on what the Frierdiker Rebbe responded to this Rav Shmotkin. He explained that what had happened is that after they started the process of printing the Maimorim, so there was an issue with the government, and the government decided to take full control of all of the Jewish printing houses. And the particular printing house that was printing these Maimorim was closed down, and they only left a couple of printing houses open that they could, apparently it was so that they could control what is being published and what is being made public. So yeah, this was the situation with the Tsar and so on.
Real censorship.
There was actual censorship, yes. So the Frierdiker Rebbe explains that when they finished the Chumash, the Maimorim of Bereshis and Shmais, that's when the publishing house was closed down. Then, at some point later, when this was done already by a different publishing house that was permitted to stay open, they continued, but they changed the name. And I think the reason they changed the name is because technically Torah R was censored, so they couldn't print it with the same name, and they had to change the name to Likutei Torah. And that's what happened. So that explains perhaps why Parshas Pekudei, so generally we think that Parashas Shmos was printed in Torah R, but apparently what it looks like is that this censorship, the closing of the printing shop happened apparently before they even got to the very last parsha of Shmos, which is Pekudei, and that ended up being printed in Likutei Torah, and that might also explain why Likutei Torah begins with a few Maimorim from Parshas B'Shalach that apparently were meant to be printed but didn't quite make it in to the Torah R. Okay, now the Torah R also has at the very end Maimorim on Purim of Megillas Esther. So I did say last week that we will start focusing on Purim, and the Mitzvah Shem we will. But before, I would like to first just touch on one little topic that's brought up in the very first chapter of this week's Likutei Torah, we can now say, in Parshas Pekudei. The Alter Rebbe asks a very basic question. We are now in the last couple of weeks, starting from Parshas Truma. So we're talking about Truma, Tetzaveh, Kisisa, Vayakel, Pekudei. All of these parshas are dealing with the mitzvah of building the Mishkan. Okay. Now we mentioned many times, and we repeated it also last week, that at the very beginning of Parshas Truma, the pasuk says that will also be mikdash. You should make for me a sanctified place, right? V'shachanti b'seichem, and I will rest amongst them. Okay, so that's the way it begins. So last week the Alter Rebbe focused on the Chazal that says b'seichoi lo nemar b'seichem. It doesn't say that I will rest in it, in that house that will be built, but it says b'seichem amongst bnei Yisrael. And from this, we derive that the way Chassidus, the perspective that Chassidus takes in this about this medrash, is that since Hashem is commanding us to build this Mishkan, and He says that it's so I should rest amongst each and every one of you, this is an indication that besides the physical structure of the Mishkan, there's also a personal Mishkan that every person has within himself. And building of the Mishkan includes also the personal the Mishkan within every single Jew. Okay, so that's a very common topic that's addressed in Chassidus. It's how we take the mitzvah and apply it on what we call in our personal avodah, in our personal service. And this, and again, this was very much the topic of last week's Maimer. And especially, it's interesting that nowadays that we don't have the Mishkan, so we have references in the Gemara and Chazal that we don't have the physical Mishkan. We don't have the Beis Hamikdash, we cannot bring the Karbonos, but nonetheless, the Avodah that it represents on a personal level, these are obviously things that we can do. Not only that we can do, we need to do, we must do, we should do. And not only that, in a sense, it's even more amplified. There's more focus on that, because that is the only way that we can do, for example, the avodah of the Karbonos, absence the actual structure of the Beis Hamikdash, which is absolutely required in order to do the mitzvah of the Karbonos. Okay. In this week's parsha, in this week's Maimer Parshas Pekudei, so the Alter Rebbe actually focuses on the simple pshat, also the mikdash v'shachanti b'seichem, which just on the surface means that I want you to make a mishkan so that I will dwell amongst you, just so there's a place where there's the presence of Hashem. The Alter Rebbe asks a very basic, fundamental question. First of all, why? Like, what's behind this mitzvah, this request from Hashem? So, the first thing is that the Alter Rebbe, he refers to a medrash, and this medrash basically says that the reason why Hashem created the world is because this Hashem desired to have a dwelling place in this world. Okay, now again, that doesn't really tell us why, but it says what's behind the mitzvah, some background to this tzivui of this also the mikdash. Because Hashem wants to have a presence amongst you, wants to have a presence in this world. Now, this is interestingly, there are other sources, there are other places that that offer some explanation as to why Hashem even created this world, etc., etc. There's that which is mentioned. That Hashem has the desire, legalis koychaisov, he wants to reveal his koyach, his capacity, that which he is capable of doing, and there are other explanations. But the bottom line is that the Alter Rebbe elsewhere, the Alter Rebbe says he doesn't reject those other things, but he concludes they cannot be the main reason, and because there are different questions that arise. If that would be the sole and the only explanation as to why Hashem decided to create this world and to put Yidden into this physical world and give them Torah and mitzvahs for them to do. And the reason that the Alter Rebbe says is the most fundamental, the most basic of the reasons is that Hashem has a place. He wants a dira. He wants a dwelling place in this world. And so that's what's behind it. And again, like I said, that doesn't really explain why, but the truth is, and Chassidus points this out, that there's a reason why the Chazal used the term nisav, he desired. And the way there's an expression of a taive frek benishken kashes. There are certain things that a person wants, and the reason why he wants them is because there's some kind of a rationale behind it. He thought about it. He came to the conclusion that this is something that would be beneficial, etc. And so therefore he wants it. He wants it for the benefit that it will provide. Okay, that's called the rotzin, which is the mata b'tambedas. It's the rotzin that comes as a product of the person having analyzed and come to a conclusion that this is something that he wants to do. Okay, but then there's something of a rotzin, which is l'mayla mitam v'das. There's a desire that goes beyond the logic. It's something that it is generated by something even deeper than a person's understanding, a person's seichel. It's coming from a deeper place. And even the person himself does not quite know why he wants it, but he's absolutely 100% certain and convinced and committed and he really, really wants it. So that's a different kind of a rotzeh. So when the Chazal used the term nisave, atayve, and then there's this Yiddish expression, so to speak, atayve frek benishken kashes, you can't ask any questions, you can't challenge atayve, is because we're looking at the word taive as a reference to the kind of a desire, the want that comes from this deeper place, the rotzeh, which is l'maylo mitam v'das. It's beyond any rationale or any reasoning. Okay. So this is the Chazal, and like I said, this is the reason behind creation that the Alter Rebbe says is the most fundamental explanation as to why Hashem created the world, etc. Okay. Says the Alter Rebbe asks a question. Says, what does it mean Hashem wants to have a dwelling place in this world? What does that mean? So, I mean, why? Why is that? Why? It's already, what's it called? It's already established. And the Alter Rebbe quotes a pasuk, "Es hashamayim v'sa'aretz ani molei," the heavens and the earth I fill. Hashem is everywhere. There's asar panoimine. There's, as the Zohar says, there's no place that is void of Hashem. Hashem is already there. So why that Hashem command Nisava leYisborech lias leYidira b'tachteinu. Why did he tell us to make a mishkan? Because he has this desire to have a dwelling place in this world. He's already there. And the answer, in short, that the Alter Rebbe says here already in the very first paragraph of this week's Maimer, the Alter Rebbe says that you have to understand what exactly this taiva, what is this desire that Hashem had? Okay, and I'm going to add some words here that the Alter Rebbe doesn't actually use, but these are words based on Sichos of the Rebbe, Maimorim of the Rebbe. I actually have in my possession a copy. So I mentioned my teacher Rabbi Khan many times. Now Rabbi Khan was involved in a project of creating an encyclopedia of terms in Hasidus, of ideas, concepts in Hasidus. It's kind of like styled after what's called the Encyclopedia Talmudis, which was a project that began, sometime in the 1930s, I think, or whatever. One of the people very much involved was actually a Lubavitcher Chassid, Rav Zevin, Rav Yosef Zevin. He was one of the editors. I think he might have been even the person that initiated this whole project. It's actually an ongoing project.
When he wanted to run for chief rabbi, and the Rebbe told him he should stay in Encyclopedia Talmudis because other people be chief rabbi, but other people.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, so he was a chassid. He was clearly a chassid. There are some very interesting correspondences in discussions that he had with the Rebbe in some halachic issues. They're all available. It's all been published. So this is how Rabbi Yosef said. I was mentioning about Rabbi Khan, and the Rebbe wanted very much that he should publish this. It's called what's it called? Chaim. It's not called encyclopedia. I think that it was
Sefer Erechim.
Sefer Erechim. It's called the Book of Erechim. Erechim means topics in Chassidus. And it's actually styled, if you're familiar with Encyclopedia Talmudis, which, by the way, the Rebbe very much supported, and the Rebbe was somewhat behind, certain things that were done in the producing of the Encyclopedia Talmudis. But in any case, this Sefer HaErchim is styled very much, like that, like the Talmudic Encyclopedia. But in any case, when they printed the first volume, so Rabbi Yale prepared what's called a preface, a Hakdama. Okay, the Hakdama actually never made it into the actual printing, but I happen to have a copy of it, of what he wrote, and there he addresses this whole topic, what the Alter Rebbe is speaking about in this Maimer. If Hashem is there anyway, right? So why, like we said, I mean, Hashem, of course, is everywhere. So why the desire to have a dira leYisborech b'tachteinu? What do you mean have a dwelling place? You're already here, right? What does that mean? And in this essay that he intended to be used as the Hakdama, the preface to the book, it's based on a Sikha and a Maimer from the Rebbe, and the Rebbe takes apart the whole concept of this desire to have a dira b'tachtenim, which answers basically what the Alter Rebbe says here very much in short. Okay, so what the Alter Rebbe says is that part of this desire is not simply to be present, but that he should be begoli, who should be seen and recognized and known in this world. Okay? Changes everything. It's not about Hashem being here because Hashem is here. It's about us recognizing that Hashem is here and not just knowing it in some kind of an abstract way, but literally it should be begoli, it should be revealed. Hashem's presence should be manifested on a level where it's not only recognized by us, but it's recognized by a Yid, for example, which is something that he acquires, I guess, through his attaching himself to Hashem through Torah and mitzvahs, but it should be something that actually the world should recognize. And in the beer of the Rebbe says this is the meaning of tachtoinim. He wanted that his dira should be in the lowest possible place. Okay. Now, the fact that Hashem is in everywhere, not just in the heavens and in the holy spheres or whatever, but he's actually everywhere, is a basic fundamental idea of Ein Od Milvado. There's nothing but Hashem, and also, the quote that I said before was Leis Asar Padoi Minei. There's no place that is void of Hashem. Okay, but if that is merely attributed to the fact that Hashem, however you're going to describe Hashem, but one of the things that you're going to conclude, if Hashem is indeed Ein Od Milvado, if Hashem is Deren Ein Sof, he is infinite, etc., you cannot put any limitation on the infinite by saying that there are certain places that are void of him. Okay. And this is something that everybody agrees. I mean, I can go off on a full tangent over here and discuss the debate about tzimtzum, whether tzimtzum is kipshute, tzimtzum is lav kipshute. Basically, it means that when Hashem, this infinite light, in order to create a physical world, that the physical world itself could be a state of existence that doesn't even recognize Hashem, or chas v'sholom even deny the existence of Hashem. So this could only be as the result of what's called the tzimtzum. Hashem had to reduce that infinite light. Okay, so what ensued, and this is basically something that was discussed by the Ramak in the 1500s in Sfas, and then by his Talmud the Arizal, and so that's where the idea of the tzimtzum was developed primarily, and what ensued after that was a debate as to whether this tzimtzum, which basically means Hashem contracted himself, so he created, so to speak, like a void of his infinite self, and whether that means that whether it was a literal removal, which would mean that there's actually a place that Hashem is not there, right? Hashem could create something, a place, a situation, and he's not there. Okay. But the common denominator of all the different shittos, and this is something that the Rebbe writes about, and it's been, there's much been written on this topic. The bottom line is that when you speak about the essence of Hashem, nobody could even suggest that the essence of Hashem is not there. So when we say Les Asar Padoi Minei, that there's no place void of Hashem, if we're talking about the essence of Hashem, there's no disagreement about that. Okay, there are people who are aware of the debate that took place, but they're not quite aware of this idea that we're not dealing with the essence. Okay. And they mistakenly think that, according to the opinion that says that the tzimtzum was kipshute, that it means literally, right? It means that the essence of Hashem somehow is removed. This, the Alter Rebbe clearly in Tanya says, cannot even be something to be considered. Okay, the issue is this infinite light, so it's a little different than when we're talking about the essence. So the infinite light that emanates from Hashem, and it's infinite, and it's the absolute infinite, by the way, right? But because it's an actual reflection of the essence of Hashem, and it's a full reflection. But it's still, we're not talking about the essence. Okay, so that just, we'll put that aside. That's not even under consideration. So, but Hashem did create a world that, at least from some perspective, there is a void of his existence, right? There is this thing called the tzimtzum. So again, like I said, I don't want to get too much into the debate, but the bottom line is that there's some kind of a phenomenon of Hashem removing himself. Okay, so says the Alter Rebbe, when we say Adir b'Tachtonim, what we're saying is that since Hashem created a situation where there is, at least that there seems to be a void of his presence, okay? Not in essence, but there's a void of his presence. Otherwise, how would it even be possible for there to be this denial of his existence? It could, it happens. How could it be? So there is this kind of a tzimtzum, and the tzimtzum is basically that he's there, but he is not present in the sense that that you could see that he's there. Okay? And this is the Alter Rebbe, is the Shamayim is a reference to the fact that he's there. However, it doesn't necessarily mean that he's openly there. He's not openly there. And that is the point of this mikdash. This mikdash is basically the mitzvah where Hashem tells us that through this mitzvah, you will not only make me present in this world, you'll make me obviously present in this world, openly, right? Bigolui, as it says. It'll be revealed that Hashem is there. Okay. Now back to what the Rebbe says. He says so having a deer. The words actually that the Rebbe used in the Sikha, the Rebbe said it's not just having a dwelling place, but he used that Yiddish term, it should be an illuminated dwelling place, okay? And because that like try to imagine, you have a house, but it's dark. Or nobody knows you're there. But that's not what a dira means. A dira means you're there, you're fully there, you're completely there, right? It can't be hidden. And then on top of that, it has to be something that's all inclusive. There's no place that you don't see that. And that's the term tachtoinim. He's there, he wants to be there, he wants to be openly there, not hiding there somehow. He wants to be openly there, but he wants to be there completely everywhere, right? And he doesn't want to be there because he's able to be there. He wants it to be b'tachtoinim, meaning that the tachtoinim agree that he's there. The tachtoinim means that the realities that we live in this world, even some of the very harsh realities, right? In the very harsh realities where it's very easy to kind of lose your faith in betachin, and somehow feel like Hashem is completely void, right? We don't have to go too much into the description of that, but we all know that there's, this exists, this happens. So that just being there, right, is not enough. It has to be where the tachtoinim on their own are able to actually recognize that he is truly there, and not only that he's truly there, he can be seen and recognized. Okay, there's a song. I think it's from Reb Nachman from Breslov. It's based on something that he said that I feel in the worst of the halames, the worst of the hester, and the deepest places, the darkest places. Hashem is certainly there. So it's not just about having this emunah that Hashem is there. Ultimately, it's about, like the Alter Rebbe says here, that it should be bigolui. It should be something that's absolutely 100% obvious and clear and recognized by everyone everywhere. And the combination, of course, the process is the Avodah. And this Avodah is the kind of Avodah where we include also the realities of the world and the Kollel, the means that are provided by this world, and then we incorporate them into our Torah and into our mitzvahs. That is part of the process of coming to that ultimate fulfillment of Hashem's desire, which is that he is completely 100% openly revealed in a revealed fashion, present in absolutely everything that exists, regardless of how dark it may be. Okay, so that's a very fundamental idea. in Hasidus. And here we find that this is mentioned here in the Maimer of Parshas Pekudei. Okay. And this will be a little bit of the beginning of our discussion when it comes to Purim. Okay. So there seems to be a nekuda that's, I noticed, a nekuda means an idea that I noticed seems to be a common thread in a number of the Maimorim that we talked about over the last few weeks. Okay, and that is that in spite of the fact that Hashem wants us as we are, who we are, meaning very limited mortal beings, right, to strive to connect to the infinite. Okay. And then last week, for example, we spoke about the idea, how's it even possible? If you're infinite, there's no bridge between the infinite, if you're finite, there's no bridge between the finite and the infinite. A finite state cannot ever progress to the infinite. It just can't. That's by definition. It's like the Alter Rebbe actually mentions this in Tanya. The Alter Rebbe says anything that's finite, and if you look at it mathematically, right? So if it has a number, that means it could be quantified, right? You could say there's so much. So no matter how big you go, the smallest number still has a relationship with the greatest number. Okay, so this is just a mathematical truth that the Alter Rebbe points to. And basically, the concept behind it is that there is no bridge between the finite and the infinite. So how does a Yid even begin the Avodah? So I want to mention. I read yesterday. I read an interesting article, and basically, it's interesting. I mentioned the Shmotkins. Right? So the article was, I got yesterday in the mail. I got one of their pamphlets that they send out, whatever, before Purim, before Pesach, and I read in there an article. I don't know if it was reprinted from somewhere, but possibly. But in any case, the article was about a gentleman from Israel who was a reporter for a newspaper. It says that he was a reporter for Yediot Achronot, which is one of the major newspapers in Eretz Yisrael. Now, this particular person, you can tell from the article that he leans to the right. I believe Yediot Achronot is also the paper that's considered to be the one that's more conservative, as opposed to one of the other major newspapers, which is called the Ma'ariv, which is supposedly leans more to the left. Okay. So he's a reporter for Yediot. He had actually met the Rebbe in 1959. Okay. So I don't remember exactly what the context was, but he had met the Rebbe. In 1967, so we're talking about like 8 years later, he happened to be in America for a certain period of time. I'm not sure exactly what he was doing, but he was continuing also contributing articles and reporting for the Yediot Achronot. Being that he was living in New York, so he decided, it's been a long time. It wasn't the last time he met the Rebbe was in 1959, so he wanted to meet the Rebbe again. So he went through the normal procedure. He called the office. He spoke to the secretaries. Now, this was in the month of Tishrei. Tishrei is the month of, Shoshana, Yom Kippur, right? Very busy month. So he asked if it's possible to get an audience, and they said it's definitely not happening in the next month or two because it's impossible. But what they told him was on Erev Rosh Hashanah. On Erev Rosh Hashanah, by the Rebbe, these were one of the days where the daven Shabbos at 8 o'clock in the morning, and the Rebbe would also daven together with the minyan. Up until Tafshin Mem Ches, until the passing of the Rebbetzin Chayimushka, the Rebbe did not daven Shachris together with the minyan. He would come out on Mondays and Thursdays for Kriyas HaTorah, but the Rebbe would daven in the privacy of his study. This was the Rebbe's Seder up until 1988. 1988, yeah, okay. After that, the Rebbe davened, well, first of all, for that first whole year, the Rebbe davened for the Amud, because, that was the year of the Evelus, for Rebbe Zkainim, but even after the year, the Rebbe continued to daven together publicly, Shachas with the minyan. But until that point, that wasn't the case, except for certain days during the year, and one of those days was Erev Rosh Hashanah. So Erev Rosh Hashanah, I remember many times, participated, 8 o'clock in the morning, the Rebbe davens. Okay. After davening, the Rebbe goes back up to his room. And then the Rebbe comes to the door of his room. In the meantime, a whole line of Hasidim had already begun, right? And people would pass by the Rebbe and hand the Rebbe what's called a pidyon nefesh, a pan, in which you ask the Rebbe, to daven on your behalf, appropriate, especially Erev Rosh Hashanah, beginning of the new year. And everybody walked by, and the Rebbe would wish everyone very quickly, and the Rebbe would take the pidyon, and the Rebbe would gather them in his hand, would take it with his right hand, put it, transfer it to his left hand, and then after a period of time when it filled up on the left side, the Rebbe walked into his room, laid them down on the table, came back to the door, and the Chassidim kept, would file by. So it was pretty quick, but there were a lot of people, so it could take hours. I mean, literally, there's a line that went outside, and down the block, and people were constantly, be coming. So, like I said, it took a long time. So if the davening was 8, and davening was over at 9, and let's say the Rebbe came out, let's say at 9:30 or whatever, right? And people would start going by. The Rebbe would also go to the Ohel on Erev Rosh Hashanah. So the Rebbe would be standing from after Shachris until the time that he would go to the Ohel, which would be maybe 11 or 12 o'clock on Erev Rosh Hashanah. The Rebbe would be standing, accepting these pidyonos, and then going into his room and putting it down. I'm saying this, I mean, it's not necessary for the story to tell all of these details, but I think it's also a good idea, to review some of the things that took place. I mean, many people are very interested and they like to hear. So that's why I'm elaborating so much. It has nothing to do necessarily with the story of this reporter. But so I'll add also that when the Rebbe would come down to davening on Rosh Hashanah, so then the secretaries would be walking behind the Rebbe with these big bundles wrapped in brown paper with a string around them. There were maybe 4 or 5 of these bundles. And when the Rebbe would go to his place at the front of the shul, there was a little table there, and all the bundles would be sitting on the table. When the Rebbe went for his aliyah, which would be maftir, the first, in the first 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, so the Rebbe would, when he would go up to the bima where they would read the Torah, these packages, these pekalach, would follow the Rebbe, meaning the secretaries would take them. It took at least 2 of the secretaries because there was quite a few bundles. Each bundle was, whatever. Now, these bundles, apparently, these were the pidyonos that the people have given the Rebbe on Erev Pesach. When the Rebbe went up for his aliyah, so the Rebbe stayed there after the Haftarah. He read the Haftarah because the Rebbe was also the Baal Tokeya. The Rebbe was the one who would blow the shofar. Now, before the Rebbe would blow the shofar, so there was a very, very moving moment, and where the Rebbe would turn around and ask for these pidyonos, the pekalach, to be placed on the bima in front of him. And then between the pekalach and the Rebbe would have wrapped in like a kerchief a number of different kerchiefs he would have wrapped the different shayfris. The Rebbe would come, I think, with 3 shayfris. And that's when we'll begin the process of Kiyas Shofar, the blowing of the shofar. Okay. Before when it's if you're familiar with what happens, is that there's a kapitel in Tilim Lam Natseach that said 7 times. When the Rebbe would start, and the Rebbe would then take his talus, he would lean over the bima and cover his head and all of these pekalach under his talus. It was a very, very moving moment. But whatever. I felt it would be appropriate to just elaborate on that a little bit. But back to this reporter. So they told him, you know what? Here you have an opportunity. You can go by the Rebbe and bring a pidyon, write your requests, and you'll hand it to the Rebbe. And now, like I said, it would go very fast. Now he wasn't familiar, and he thought, okay, fine, we'll have a chance. We'll see the Rebbe, and he'll talk to the Rebbe. If he wants to talk, we'll discuss whatever he had in mind that he wanted to discuss with the Rebbe, which is what had happened apparently 8 years earlier in 1959. Anyway, so he gets in the line, right? And it became pretty apparent that he's not going to really be able to talk to the Rebbe very much, right? He's going to hand the letter, and the Rebbe is going to say, the people standing with him in line explain to him the procedure, and okay, fine. He gets in line, and the line would move fairly quickly, and he finds himself standing right opposite the Rebbe. He hands the Rebbe the pidyon, and he couldn't even say anything, he couldn't speak out of his mouth. So he's about to, so he's like kind of being moved, away. And in the meantime, another 2 or 3 people already passed the Rebbe, but the Rebbe, when he handed, the Rebbe said something to him. And it took him a while for it to register. What did the Rebbe tell him? The Rebbe told him, Nit azay schreibt men afayidin. That's it, 1 sentence. This is not the way that you write about another Jew. Okay? Like I said, it was totally unexpected, and it took him a little while to just even register what the Rebbe had just said to him, right? This is not the way that you write about another Yid. But then when he realized, at that point already, there was no way that he could have responded to the Rebbe. There was no way. So, I'm not sure exactly how this happened, but maybe he went back into the maskiros, or maybe he did try to attempt, and the Rebbe said to him that you'll come back in a few days and I'll explain. So I don't know if that happened face to face, or if that happened when he went into the maskiros and he said the Rebbe said something to me, and he wasn't sure, and he wants to be able to continue that conversation with the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said you'll come back in a few days and we'll talk about it. Okay. So he speaks to the maskiros, to the secretaries, and he says, the Rebbe said he wants to talk about it. So they said same thing. He said, listen, there's no way that you're going to get a private meeting now, but in a few days will be the 6th of Tishrei. On the 6th of Tishrei is the yahrzeit of the Rebbe's mother, Rebbe Tzimchana. That had happened in between 1959 and 1967 and 1964 actually. She had passed away, and it was on the 6th of Tishrei, and the Rebbe held a Farbrengen every year on the occasion of the yahrzeit. So come to the Farbrengen. Okay, so he came to the Farbrengen. He said there's thousands of people, and he said the Rebbe actually kind of acknowledged his presence. He says, at the Farbrengen, he said, at some point, the Rebbe started speaking at Sikha. What was the Sikha the Rebbe was speaking? So the Rebbe addressed something that it says in the Gemara Sukkah. In the Gemara Sukkah, we find that brings a Braise, and in this Braise, there's a machlokes between Rabbi Eliezer, I think, and the Chachamim. So, what does Rabbi Eliezer say? We all know that the halacha is that to do the mitzvah of lulav, on the first day of Sukkot, you cannot borrow the lulav. It has to be yours. Because it says, "L'kachtem lochem." You shall take to you. And from this, we learn that you have to own the lulav that you use. So practically, even though not everybody actually owns a lulav, but when somebody gives you their lulav, it's many people actually have the practice of saying, "I'm giving it to you, but I'm making a condition that you give it back to me." So technically, when he does the mitzvah, it's actually his because it was given to him. The question is, what about the sukkah? So the first night of Sukkot, we have a mitzvah that we have to go in the sukkah and we have to be mekayim. We have to do the mitzvah reading in the sukkah. Now, about sukkah, it also says loch. Shivas yamim sukkah tasaloch. I don't remember exactly the pasuk. And the Rebbe says, likewise, the sukkah has to be yours. Come the chachamim, and the chachamim say no. And what's the proof? The proof is because the pasuk says, "Kol ha'ezach b'Yisrael yeshu b'sukkos." All the dwellers of Israel should sit in the sukkah. Say the chachamim. What do we learn from this pasuk? That ruyim kol Yisrael leishev b'sukkah achas. All Yidden can sit in one sukkah. It doesn't have to belong to each one individually. Anybody could sit in a sukkah and be mekayim and fulfill the mitzvah of sitting in a sukkah. So, okay, so this is what the Chacham said. This is actually the halacha. You don't have to own the sukkah that you're sitting in and doing the mitzvah of sitting in the sukkah. Chassidus, I mean, this pasuk, I mean, I'm sure it's not just the Chassidus, but many of the Darshanim quote this Gemara, they quote this pasuk, Kol Yisrael, Kol Ezra Yisrael, Yeshu B'Sukkos, and the way that the Gemara says that Ruyim Kol Yisrael Yeshu B'Sukkah Achas, as there's something about a sukkah, where a sukkah unites all Yidden, and therefore anybody, could be sitting in the sukkah and it doesn't matter. So here the Rebbe started talking, and this reporter realized that the Rebbe was talking and responding, explaining what the Rebbe had said to him when he went by on Erev Rosh Hashanah, and he handed the Rebbe a picture. What did the Rebbe continue? The Rebbe said that sitting in a sukkah, he said you can have in the sukkah, you can have a yid that's a tzaddik gomor, right? But when the Chazal said that Ruyim Kol Yisrael, all Yidden are worthy of sitting together in the sukkah, it doesn't qualify what that yid has to be, other than the fact that he's a yid. So he says the other yid can be someone who completely rejects Yiddishkeit, he rejects everything, and yet it's ru'uyim. It's still befitting that they should sit together in one sukkah. Okay, so he realized, the Rebbe is talking directly to him. What's the pshat? The Rebbe is talking to him. He said what happened just before that. There was a member of the Knesset. His name was actually Wilner. He was a Yid, but unfortunately, he was the head of the Communist Party. Now, apparently, he had some support he had in, what's it called, in the Israel at the time. There were people who were communists, and he actually was in the Knesset, meaning that he had the Communist Party, and he received enough votes in order to represent, in the Knesset. So here you have what happened is that after the 6-Day War, he had said some really, really terrible things. And by the way, it's something that history seems to be repeating itself right now. And he was saying how the Arabs, whatever, he was literally, in full support. He was about as left could be, right? And supporting the Arabs, and we have the right to be here, whatever that means. I don't know. Okay, I'm not going to get it. What happened is that somebody got so mad at this Wilner that they caught him in the foyer of his house, of his home. He was coming home, and he stabbed him. So what happened immediately, they rushed him to the hospital, and it wasn't a serious wound, and he survived. So this reporter had written in the paper, he had written that it's too bad that the knife wasn't sharper and it wasn't longer. Okay, that's what he wrote. And like I said, this some of the things that this Wilner had written and the positions that he had taken were, it was enough to prompt somebody to want to what's it called to stab him with a knife. Anyway, now he understood that this is what the Rebbe was talking. This is what the Rebbe meant, right? So first of all, he was just like amazed, flabbergasted. Here he is. There are thousands of people walking by the Rebbe. He had met the Rebbe once when he was there previously in 1959. So that was 8 years prior. He had met the Rebbe. And the Rebbe, and as he's walking by, and like I said, it's going very quick, the Rebbe immediately recognized him. Not only the Rebbe recognized him, the Rebbe, like in an instant, the Rebbe made a comment. What was the comment? Nicht hazeh schreibt ben afayid. It's not the way you write about another yid, right? And here at the Fabrengen, the Rebbe said, I'll explain it to you in a few days, or come back in a few days, I'll explain it. I'll explain to you what I mean. And here at the Fabrengen, the Rebbe was explaining to this reporter from the Yediot Achronot exactly what it was, what he meant. He might be, on the surface, he might be terrible. But the bottom line is that he's a Yid. And being that he's a Yid, that's not something that's what's it called. That's not debatable. That's not changeable. That's not, it is, and it is what it is. Okay. I think that there was like the Rebbe also said that in essence, they're a Yid. And even though on the surface they could, be engaged in some like really questionable, disgusting things, right? It doesn't change the fact that he's a Yid. And the Rebbe said, and this is one of the things that we could learn from the mitzvah of lulav, is that what do you do when you take the lulav? Lokachtem lachem. So you take and you shake it, right? He says sometimes he said all it requires is to take the Yid and give him a shake. And when you give him a shake, then all of that stuff just kind of like falls off like dry leaves, right? And you're left with his true existence, his true essence. And again, it doesn't matter how low that particular person had unfortunately gone. So this is a reference to what's called the essence of a yid. I started to connect this with a theme about the last couple of Maimorim that we learned, but we'll leave that maybe for next time. But the bottom line is that it's all about a reference to the essence, the Pinta Layid, the Nekuda Ha'atzmis of a Yid. And Mirz Hashem, this is really what Purim is all about. It could be said that Purim is the celebration of this element, this quality that absolutely every Yid possesses. And Mirz Hashem, next week, we will elaborate on that. Okay, so I think time has run out. It is 11:30. And Mirz Hashem, next week, we will get into the Maimorim where the Alter Rebbe makes this point about the celebration of the essence, the not just the essence, but the bond that a Yid has in essence